All right, well, why don't we go ahead and get started then, since we get a little bit of time for people to wander in. But just thanks so much for coming out to this mental health panel. My name is Steve Johnson. I'm a licensed professional counselor and national certified counselor. I run a clinic in town called Advocate Psychotherapy Services. About a year ago, we had a chance to come out in partnership with Crew and do a seminar on anxiety and depression. And so here we are 12 months later. The world looks a little different, let's say, since we were last here, although I think the night we did it was the night the university shut down. Yeah. So what an example of a year later, we are still dealing with the effects of this, which is the perfect segue why we wanted to do a panel, just to find out what are some voices from on campus, what have they seen, observed, how have they been able to help or make some recommendations, of course, too, tonight, to just try and do things better. So I just wanted to begin with mentioning a few things. If you have questions, feel free to ask. We'll make sure we have time. I think we'll have plenty of time for the five of us to share some of our thoughts. But if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask. I'll either take some notes or we can pause, and whoever on the panel wants to be able to answer it certainly can. Tonight, just from a practical standpoint, with the mask mandate, if you're speaking in a presentation, you can take your mask off and then put it back on when you're done or when you're taking a drink. So we'll just follow the same. That way, this is being recorded tonight. It'll come across clearly with what we're saying so people can value it tomorrow and be able to understand what's going on. So now that I've introduced myself, we'll go clockwise here and start with Dana and introduce yourselves and where you're from here on campus.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Dana Bouch. I am the Residence Hall Association president. I am also a student on campus. I'm a junior majoring in Spanish education, political science, and international studies. So I definitely feel the effects of COVID in class and work.
Thank you.
Excellent. Hi, my name is Perry Cook. I'm a professor of education here on campus. I was a student here way back in 79 to 83, so I'm used to this venue. Love what I get to do, impact teachers and get them ready to go into the field. Certainly we've seen a ton of changes because of COVID in the education department, having to go to Zoom synchronous and have appointments online. I have office hours in Zoom, and so just some really big changes that we've dealt with.
It's always awkward when you gotta take your mask on and off. But my name is Courtney Horman, and I serve as one of the area directors of Crew here in central Wisconsin. I've served here, even specifically at UWSP, for nearly 10 years. So I have seen since the 2011-2012 school year to now quite the progression of working with college students. So I have the privilege of hanging out with them on a daily basis, mentoring them, getting to know them, spending time with them, but then also just hearing about their life and talking about life and spiritual things. That's where I spend the majority of my days.
I'm Jason Siebert. I am a psychologist here in our counseling center. I have a role on campus that kind of is pretty consistent with what you'd expect a psychologist to do. So individual therapy, one-on-one is a big part of my life. But I'm also responsible for all education and prevention work on campus insofar as it concerns mental health. So I have a large role where it concerns training, new faculty and staff, student leadership, hall staff and that stuff, and crisis management and things like that.
Well, thank you all for introducing yourself. If you're here in the room, you saw in the chair when you came in, we have just some contact information in this handout, just a chance to do it, but also in the last couple of pages, maybe just a few spots to take some notes if you hear something that goes on. But even if you don't have the ability to do that, each of our contact, I believe, emails are listed. So if there's something that people are watching tomorrow and have a question, or even tonight, you can follow up with us at your convenience later on. So just in terms of how we got here, when we were brainstorming, I think, Courtney, 4 or 5 weeks ago, and trying to find out what goes on. As we said, it's been 12 months that this has been affecting. Obviously, we're just focused on UWSP tonight. So I think the last 12 months is a good reminder of how some issues make its presence known in your life and doesn't go away very easily. So this constant sense of intrusive interruptions, I mean, even tonight, see chairs spread out to this degree, or knowing that classes are that way. I'm a parent in the community, so my kids are in the local schools, and they're all reporting the same thing. It is an opportunity just to see that this constant sense of loss or change or difference is daily. And that starts to wear people down at a certain point. And I think it's something that we can all agree with. There's not one person right now that's not been affected by COVID, either directly or indirectly. There's been some type of either person in your family that may have had to face the worst of it, or even a loss of life given the numbers where they are, but certainly the daily routine and what we're used to has been affected across the board. Not anything has been sacred or not touched by it. Everyone's had to accommodate. So in that way, it's one of the unique things that everybody can relate to. Not just in do you remember what it was like when? There are certain events that happen in American history or in our lives. Do you know where you were in 2020? How did that affect you in 2020? Now it becomes a life-shaping kind of event. And to echo that, one of the things that we were talking about was not just have me come and speak and share what's going on, but to try and make it unique to what are the different aspects that have been affected here. As a private practice counselor, just thinking about the different life stages that have happened, every life stage we can think of has done it. I have 2 elementary school kids. They're out at school at the playground or classrooms, but you can't do physical touch. So you have to play by yourself. Just the sense of telling kids that no, stay further apart when you're in play. So it's interrupted even that early stage of life. Middle and high school students, sorry, your sports season, your extracurriculars, your orchestra and music performances are all canceled. And what do they do for their socialization? Even thinking about either whether college age or single adults who are isolated and disconnected from their routines. Normally you can get up and go anywhere you want to do and connect with the people that you care about, but certainly early on in the pandemic when nothing was open and allowed, families were hunkered down for good, bad, or worse, right? Good, bad, or worse. They were together. But if you didn't have that, the sense of isolation was pretty profound. Even couples unable to have support for growing in their relationships, or families unable to see grandparents or be able to travel places where they wanted to go. Every life stage. And even thinking of older adults who, knowing that the vulnerability to COVID-19 and how that affects, and finally finishing with elderly in nursing homes who are unable to have visitors or experience touch. And interesting how the lifespan begins with no touch and is ending with no touch, and just the sense of loss that probably has come. But in giving some thought to it, I think I can make a case that college students have had a pretty unique experience with COVID-19. That they have faced a pretty defensible position to say that your lives may have been turned upside down just as much or more than some of these other life stages. And here's why I would say that. You think about freshmen showing up on campus who are away from home for the first time. Maybe they're not just from Stevens Point or Central Wisconsin, but they've come in from out of state and now suddenly they can't. Who are they going to connect with? Who are they going to be? Where's their peer group and everything else? So they have lower levels of support. Maybe they haven't connected a lot with student orgs or anything else. If student orgs aren't running, then it's even harder. Thinking of what it means to go to college. I'm going to go study and be in classes all day long, and I'm going to hang out with people at night and on the weekends. And both of those were gone for the better part of the last 12 months, and certainly have been radically different since any part of that has come back. Even thinking of 18 to 22-year-olds may not have faced a lot of significant life-changing or paradigm-shifting experiences in their life. So there isn't much to fall back on from a sense of resiliency. So for the first time in life, by themselves, away from home, they face something where everything is turned upside down. All the classes going online, as Dr. Cook talked about, adjustment for professors, but even you have to adapt to staring at your screen all day. And how annoying and tiring that is, whether it's just for your own amusement or if it's studying or doing anything else. Socialization's been discouraged. Don't have parties. Don't have get-togethers. Don't go to the wedding of family. You can't go to the funeral of your grandma who died. Just thinking of the life stage events that affect college students, of what is happening. They can't go to those things. Jobs have been eliminated or downsized because people weren't going out to shop or do things they need to do. How many restaurants, So how many waiters and waitresses lost their jobs, and that was their part-time job in college? So those are things that really come to life as well. And to make it worse, they can't even go home easily to spend time with their family, because maybe their parents are a little worried about you coming back from Stevens Point and all your college roommates and everything else, and you're going to bring something home that's going to cause chaos. But this is the pressure that I think everyone has faced on a college campus. So when you think about all of that pressure, how can we have insightful and practical recommendations? And that's where this panel idea comes from. Why not bring people who have been on campus or been helping students all along the way in the last 12 months and see what they have to say? So not just from a counselor in the community working with college students, but what is it like here on campus? So we've been preparing over the past few weeks to some questions that I asked the panelists to give some thought to. And so for just flow, we'll kind of start with Dana and work around and kind of go from those questions and move forward through a couple. We'll finish the evening with recommendations that each of us would have of how to make this perhaps the final weeks of this semester or even going into the summer term much more effective and better. So in terms of the first question, the first couple of questions was, what were some of the most detrimental effects that you've observed, each one of our panelists, that you've observed in the lives of students because of COVID-19? So Dana, I'll leave it to you first.
All right. Well, work-wise, the biggest thing that I've recognized both at my job at RHA and at my second job at Campus Activities and Student Engagement, or CASE, I've noticed a large lack of involvement in students, not only in what student orgs are active this year, but in how many people are coming to events in person. For my jobs, I look at attendance records and everything, and it's a stark contrast looking at this year's attendance rates versus last year and the year before, and seeing just quite how drastically you can drop in numbers because students either don't want to come out, they don't feel comfortable coming out, or they weren't able to make friends, so they don't want to go alone to the event. And that leads me into my second point, is a lot of students feel really disconnected this year. It's really hard to build a community and to feel part of a campus when, you have to stay 6 feet apart. You can't high five, you can't hug, you can't really do anything. You can only see half of a face. It's really hard to feel connected to people that you can't really see. I mean, in the residence halls, I live in Watson, which is primarily first-year students, and generally you will see in a first-year residence hall, every door is open almost every night of the week. Students are constantly running in and out, trying to meet new people. Everybody's going to the events that the RAs are putting on, and this year there's none of that. I don't know any of my neighbors. None of the doors are ever open. When there is an open door contest in a hall that holds, I want to say 140 people right now, there was 20 people participating in an open door contest. Whereas I know last year we held one and there were 70 people participating, and that was in midterm week when everybody has their door closed because they're studying. That's a huge impact on students because they're not getting to know their neighbors, they're not meeting friends. And I know when I moved onto campus, a big reason why I felt connected and why Point became my second home is because I had friends. I was able to connect on campus. And students that, if this is their first or second year on campus, they are having an incredibly hard time connecting with new people. And if you are a third, fourth, or a fifth year student, you're probably not reaching out to new students. You're probably not going to new events and making those new connections because it's plain harder. And as humans, we generally don't like to do what's hard. We generally like to stay in our comfort zone. And I think that's been the most difficult part, is because for the past 12 months, it's been consistently hard to do anything new aside from stay in your room, watch Netflix, watch Hulu, or, play video games. That's been the most consistent portion of the past 12 months, and I get it because I see that same thing in my life. But I definitely think disconnection and lack of involvement has been the biggest aspects of this past year.
Thank you, Dana. Dr. Cook?
I would say stress, anxiety, worry, trauma, addiction. Most of the students I talk to have personally experienced, as Steve said, some level of death, disease, or fallout from COVID. One of their own family members or a friend of the family or someone they know has either died, been in the hospital, been really sick, or been forced to isolate for extended periods of time. It's having significant impacts on just their daily lives. Another hard thing for students I've spoken to has been not knowing who to trust in the media and all of the different things going on in politics. This can influence their decision-making abilities, and we can even start living our lives in almost a COVID coma or a COVID paralysis. Some of the students I've talked to feel like there's a fog that seems to come down on them. Students become afraid to go home because they don't want to give COVID to their parents or grandparents, and some of them are simply afraid to touch things, afraid to go places, afraid to go close to people. Something else I'm seeing is exhaustion. Too much screen time. I've heard it said this way: we work and go to school on medium-sized screens, like this laptop, only to take breaks from the medium-sized screen to play on our small screens, right, our phones, so that at the end of the day we can relax by laying down on the couch and watching sometimes our really enormous screens. Too much screen time. Zumba. Binge butt. For me, I work with future teachers, and not only is there the anxiety of having to socially distance or interact in our university classes via Zoom synchronous, now to add to that, my students are recognizing they need to change their whole world view regarding what their careers might look like and what kind of teaching they may actually end up being able to do. So I see some pretty ugly things. Try to do some fun things in Zoom, try to have my students come on early and give them a social time to be able to just hang out. I've had some of the best conversations with students before and after class takes place because they're hungry for interaction with others.
Thank you. Courtney?
I will echo a little bit of what Dana and Dr. Cook already shared, but I think even I will say pre-COVID, and partly why we even had the seminar that we did last March, anxiety was already at an all-time high that I had seen and I had experienced in my years in working with you guys and working with college students. So we were already kind of coming in hot when COVID hit. And when I think about that, as I even uniquely have seen college students, their capacity, your capacity to endure more was less. It was already margined out. And all COVID did was turn up the volume on those emotions that you were already experiencing. And what I saw even right away and continued to see is the deep connection that specifically the college student generation has to everything, to information. And with COVID, it was so unknown to all of us that to be connected to something, you guys were getting so many university emails, you were getting emails from your bosses, you were getting emails from your family, you were getting emails from across the board, and then you were reading information from multiple news sources and not knowing who to trust, and multiple politicians, and so many places that unknown and that constant fear of the unknown, just even as I talked to students, you guys had to be adaptable in ways you never even thought you had to be adaptable before. And things that you thought were certain, like going to class or going to a sporting event on campus, was no longer certain. all of that was taken away. And even things like an internship that you were counting on for the summer, or student teaching, or just the classic things that you would just do in the rhythm as a college student was gone in an instant. And we didn't know, and nobody knew the answers to the questions. And at 20 years old, I mean, me being a 35-year-old woman in the community, like, when I think about what it would be as a 20-year-old to get all of that at you, that's not where you're supposed to be. That's not what you should be enduring, and that's incredibly overwhelming. And I've heard that, and I've seen it. So you take all that, and then you pair it also, I think, uniquely, more than any other group of people that I've talked to, the fear, and I know you mentioned it, Dr. Cook, the fear of something happening to your mom or your dad or your grandma or your grandpa, it just hit you like a ton of bricks. And that was real for many of you. And you never went home, or you did go home and you stayed there, and you didn't go anywhere else because you wanted to protect your family, and you had fear that you had some type of responsibility or control over that. And that is also incredibly overwhelming. And that fed isolation, and has fed isolation really deeply. I think even to what you were saying as well, Dana, like the social anxiety was already real pre-COVID, and now we're really rusty. Now I'm watching college students be really rusty. Like it's, I mean, I feel it, so I think even more so than even hearing the stats that you shared, Dana, is really helpful for me. That's real because I've seen it and I see it. But knowing that it's like, you know, you need to be there, but the energy that it takes to get yourself there and to overcome the mental exercises to get yourself there, it wins out. And it's an already unstretched muscle that is all the more weaker because of COVID and out of practice. And it's keeping us and keeping you guys in isolation. So those are the things that I would say that COVID has uniquely affected this college generation.
Dr. Siebert.
Yeah, when I first started thinking about, detrimental impacts of COVID, I started making a list. I actually brought it with me, and it's like bullet point after bullet point after bullet point. I'm like, I'm gonna start dominating this conversation. This is not gonna be a panel anymore. I gotta pull up, but like, it was not hard for me to start generating a list. And, some of the things that kind of rise to the top for me are things like, obviously we've been talking a little bit as this panel about isolation. That's a huge matter, but it's a forced isolation. And I think that that's an important thing to keep in mind. Even introverts benefit from social connectedness. And there's a lot of research that supports like the value and importance of social connectedness in mental and emotional wellness. That is a research line that goes 10 miles deep and is really compelling. And the thing about an introvert is they do like to do social connectedness on their own terms and in measured doses, but I've never encountered an introvert who wants anything like this, and they don't want, forced, formalized, stilted, and awkward forms of isolation any more than anybody else. I think Zoom is a really poor substitute for the experience of genuine connection with other people. And not to tie this to our conversation to alcohol, but let me just say this. Zoom happy hour ain't happy hour. It's not fun, right? I've pulled up some of my friends that I don't get to see very often in these quote-unquote Zoom happy hours, and I crack a beer and whatever, but it's not the same. It's fine. I like seeing these people. It's nice to catch up, but it's not. I would much rather be doing this around the picnic table, and the differences are really evident to me in that way. I'll say that I think people who kind of are new to the school and want to make new connections are at a particular disadvantage because, a lot of people, if you've been here for a few years, maybe you have something of a network developed, right? Maybe you have a few roommates that you've known, we're able to cobble together something. It's reduced in scope, but it still feels social. But, I'm encountering people in my clinical life who are like, I transferred here in January 2020, and I was here for 3 weeks, and I got sent home. And then I came back, and I don't know anybody still, and I've been here for a year, and I've only got a year to go or something. It's like, you can really feel behind the 8 ball in a situation like that pretty easily. And it's also caused us to rely, I think, on more and more superficial tools. Things like websites and apps and stuff as ways of connecting to people in lieu of like actually sitting down and appreciating somebody's company and getting to know somebody. We've boiled all that stuff down to the simplest essences, right? Like swipe right on this person and maybe you can interact with them later. Well, that's fine, but you're making that swipe judgment based on the narrowest description and possibly some photos, self-selected photos, And so the whole thing feels a little bit superficial in that way. The second thing that's kind of floated to the top for me is that, some people's learning style, and I'm learning this, I didn't really appreciate this at all until COVID became a thing, but some people's learning style does not suit itself well to Zoom-based or, COVID-adjusted higher education. I'm encountering people who've, been meeting with me for a number of semesters or even years, and their concerns have nothing to do with academics. Academics is not part of the picture, we're talking about something else. Those people are now all of a sudden like, I can't freaking learn this way, right? And I think we've all had the experience of going to a classroom and like, maybe it's not our finest hour, right? Like we are tired, we didn't sleep well, God forbid we're hungover, right? And you go there and you're like, okay, I'm just gonna do my level best here, I'm not peak me. And you go to these places and sometimes, in a traditional environment, you can at least catch something as it goes by, right? Just the act of being in a room while something's described around you gives you a fighting chance of grasping something about that, even if you aren't totally dialed into it. And I think that Zoom-based higher education demands being totally dialed into it in a way that, like, it puts you at a disadvantage, because if you are distracted or distractible, or just that you can't focus on a screen for that many sustained hours, I think you're at a pretty serious disadvantage. The third thing that came to my mind was just cumulative losses of the college experience. What you give us money for is book learning, right? And we are happy to make that trade. We provide you with expertise and an honest evaluation by people who are experts in their field in exchange for some tuition dollars. But if you ask somebody who's a college graduate, try it. Go ask a college graduate an open-ended question like, tell me about your college, tell me about college, right? They are not going to describe 8 a.m. French classes, right? They're going to describe the people they knew, the stuff they did, the places they hung out, and maybe after a while they'll work their way down to classes they took and the major that they had and that kind of stuff. And so, I think the college experience we've boiled it down to only its essential elements, and it shows. And so once we started teasing out all that stuff, things like missing graduation, friendly gatherings, attending games, full sports seasons if you're an athlete, student org meetings, nights out, club sports, even recreational stuff like just bar games. A girl I dated in college, the only reason I know her is because she was really into darts. And I was like, all right, I'll do that, right? And so we played a lot of darts. And if I had met that girl today and I was 20 years younger, we would have been robbed of that opportunity. And we would have been robbed of the connection because that's one of the principal things we shared. She was better than me, I got her. I think not a small one, but one I won't spend a lot of time on, is that this has caused some people to return to abusive environments. For some people, turning 18 was liberation. Right? I'm going to come to college and I can put this behind me. I can put these people behind me. And then it's like, zoink, nope. We're clearing the house. We're clearing house. Everyone's got to go home. And you're like, oh God, no. Right? And then the last thing is, it kind of speaks to what has been brought up once already, which is, finding peace with the highly varied reactions of other people. We have encountered people who are approaching COVID and COVID-related restrictions with differences of opinion. I don't think that's a controversial statement to make. And so, you find people who are very righteous about that, like, I'm at risk, this person's willfully negligent, they're putting me at risk, how dare they? It's very easy to get agitated about that. And what do? You can model better behavior, you can try and put a lid on it. I think, it's hard to kind of deal with stuff like that feels like it has such high stakes, but which you have virtually no control over. And so people are struggling with that stuff too. those are the things that kind of came to my mind when we thought about the detrimental effects.
Thank you for those thoughts. It's striking how similar it all is, no matter the differences that people have experienced, how there's certain themes that have come through. And all I would offer, just from my own perspective of working with college students, mental health is obviously in a pandemic been a priority for people to have access to it, so I've been able to work throughout the past 12 months, but to do virtual sessions with college students, my heart goes out to them all. But just answering that same question myself, I think of the sense of loss we've been talking a lot about, but from a sense of coping, if you already had some concerns, whether it's recovering from an abusive family, anxiety and depression, you would go do things to cope with it. You'd go exercise. You'd go hang out with friends. You'd go drive your car some other place and watch a show, go to a movie, do a bunch of things, all active. What has the pandemic done? It silenced all of those coping skills. So that's one observation I've made, is just the choices people have to feel better has shrunk. And almost non-existent depending on interest levels. But also, secondly, maybe the flip side of that coin is because of life stage and coming, as we've said, new to the campus, new to the community, new to the state perhaps, that there's a lot of areas in life that haven't developed yet. So this sense of whatever underdeveloped gets exposed really quickly. I don't know how to connect with people. I'm not used to going outside of my comfort zone. I used to make friends at my job. That's where I start, but I don't have my job anymore. So this combination, this wicked combination, if I can't do anything for fun because it's all gone, but also everything that I don't want to do, I now am faced with, I'm almost paralyzed with, because I'm overwhelmed and can't go forward. So even in the first round of questions, a lot of similarities, but we also talked as a panel about a second question related to it. And that would be simply, how would you best address those problems you saw? Like, what are the recommendations for students to thrive and not fail this semester even? What is the opportunity to do? And then we'll get to the end of our time about just specific other recommendations or encouragement, but this is based on what we've already observed. Here's some thoughts about how it could be better for students to thrive even amidst this pandemic that will go on. So back around again. Dana?
All right. To be honest, thinking about this question, I struggled a little bit coming up with solid recommendations for this, because as a student you hear a lot of the typical go for a walk, call a friend, reach out to your professor if you're having struggles, and it's easy to say those things and say that will help, and it's harder to actually go out and do those things, especially when your energy has been taken by other things. So many students that I've talked to, because I've asked several coworkers, several friends, people in passing, like what they would say for this. And so many people aren't just drained from COVID and from classes. They're drained from, the whole political aspect that was 2020, around elections. So many people were drained about how what one side is going to do, what the other side is going to do, who's going to be president, what policies are going to be put in place. And so many people are drained from, racial unrest in our country and social justice and everything. And it's not just one aspect. And once you put that all into one brain, all of that swirling around, and on top of that you have homework and potentially work, that recommendation to go out and take a walk, it's not feasible. It's so hard to get out of your room. And so I struggle with being able to present that option. Honestly, I know that going for walks does help, because if you are stuck in a residence hall room, which is, for those that have not been in one in a while, it's like 13 by 8 feet. And half of the students on campus share it with another person. So that's a whole bunch of stuff crammed into a tiny room with 1 or 2 people in there for the majority of the day. And it is a whole lot healthier for your mindset if you're able to escape that. But at the same time, it's also Wisconsin, so it's cold. This week it's nicer, but last 2 weeks has been miserable outside. And it's getting better. Like today I was able to go for a walk, and I can tell you with absolute certainty that after a long day of starting my responsibilities with meetings at 7 in this morning, and we'll be going till 8 o'clock this night, and then on top of that I have homework to do tonight for class. I can tell you going for a walk definitely has helped, but I also know most days I don't have energy for that. So for that, I honestly just recommend to students to just keep trying, and I know it's difficult, but reach out to professionals like, the counseling center, the tutoring learning center, or your professors. I know a lot of students don't want to reach out to their professors because they either don't want to upset the department that they're majoring in and want scholarships and recommendation letters from. Totally understand that. Or, one class in itself isn't stressful, but it's all 5 of them combined. Or, the combination of I have to do, 2 chapters for this class, I have to write a paper for this class, I have an oral presentation for that class. One-on-one it's not stressful. So you can't really tell your teacher that, hey, your class is stressing me out. Because it's not just their class, it's everything in life. So I get when students don't want to reach out to the professors, because I have a hard time reaching out to professors. But I just want to say, to most students, to thrive is to just reach out to people, to the TLC, who you are paying for through your segregated fees and through your tuition dollars. You're paying for their services. Reach out to the counseling center. You're also paying for their services. You're already paying for it, you're just not using it. Is kind of my philosophy. Reach out to those that are on campus and those that are off campus, that are always there. And to those that are either in student orgs or partners around campus or things that are trying to get students and trying to help them. This also goes to professors. It's really just being persistent and patient. I mean, you guys have seen the effects in your own lives, whether you are a student or not. You've seen how much your life has turned upside down and how everything about your life has changed. And if it hasn't, I'm very surprised. But being patient with students in their lack of communication because they're scared or they don't know how to tell you that your class stresses them out so much that they don't even want to attend, or understanding that students don't have the energy to come out to events, and being patient with them, and yet still being persistent, being willing to reach out to students, being willing to ask them, hey, are you doing okay? Hey, how can I help? What can I do to make it easier on you in my area of your life? And just understanding that, everyone is dealing with this differently. So in your life, if you're able to compartmentalize everything easily and separate, COVID from your work, from your personal life, everything that's going on around the world, I think, that's great. I'm glad that you're able to handle this, but not everybody is able to, and not everybody knows how to explain that. And so just having patience with yourself, other students, your professors, coworkers, just really having patience and being persistent in your pursuit of helping people is kind of what I came up with in the past 2 weeks.
Excellent, thank you.
So this campus, UW Stevens Point, used to be known as the wellness campus. 7, 8 dimensions of wellness. Dr. Bill Hetler, Dr. Fred Liefgren came up with this concept back in the 70s. There's the National Center for Wellness here in Stevens Point for many, many years. And I don't think we spend much time thinking about areas of wellness today. So I would encourage you to do some research, to take a look and pay attention, more attention to the 7 or 8 dimensions of wellness. Personally, I place a high value on the spiritual dimension of wellness because that's where I draw my hope and my strength from. I would encourage students to lean into the dimension that they choose to seek more wellness, to consider what they believe about life and the world around them, and then to seek truth and grace. I know that sounds philosophical, but man, we need to show grace unto others, and most importantly, we need to show grace to ourselves during this pandemic. Another thing I would specifically encourage students to do is to limit screen time. Develop self-discipline, learn to chunk your learning and the completion of homework for school, learn to take more short breaks, move around. Don't have to go on a walk, but just get up and move and do something other than just checking your phone and texting, tweeting, or scrolling endlessly through TikTok. I do try to get outside. Even on days when it's super cold, I still bundle up and get outside because when I get outside, I get to focus on things other than my screen, focus on other things than what's on TV. I encourage you to seek out good friends, friends who are willing to and really want to listen to what's going on in your life, provide you with grounded advice, friends who really care about you as a person. It's hard to do, but there still are places to do that safely. As a professor, I would encourage you, if you're having problems in a class, don't stay silent. Get on early in Zoom, stay late, talk to another colleague. If you're not comfortable addressing something with the professor by yourself, ask a buddy in your class if they'll stay on after with you. Just have an open and honest communication with the faculty member. They care deeply about your success. So sometimes you have to let them know, I'm not being successful and here's why. Can you help me be more successful? So I guess that would be it. Take advantage of office hours that professors do have, even if they are virtual office hours.
I have two questions that I'm going to pose back at you that I'd invite you to think about of how I would answer this question. The first question I'd invite you to think about is, have you considered that a life without day-to-day anxiety and worry and depression is actually possible? Have you considered that a life without day-to-day anxiety and worry and depression is actually possible? Or have you come to believe that your current reality will always be part of your identity? My second question is, what are you putting your hope in today? What are you putting your hope in today? A little background on me. I grew up in a family and had friendships and boyfriend relationships that hurt me and impacted my view of self and how I just looked at the world in general. And I think all of us could say that we've been hurt in the context of relationships in some way. I think it's hard when we look at the brokenness all around us that we're just going to experience it in some way, we're going to absorb it in some way. It's just a reality that we all endure. And for me, those hurts ultimately led me to have a lot of anxiety, especially when I disappointed people or they were disappointed in me, when I made mistakes, or I was just in situations I couldn't control. And I've certainly seen in this COVID season a couple times of the shadow of my old self and a feeling of out of control creeping back in and that anxiety respiking. And for much of my life, I really viewed that feeling would always be there, that I would always be somebody who was anxious and worried. And I've heard students say that, and that's even heightened in this season. I'm just a worried, anxious person. That's just how I will always be. It's like this badge that we put on ourselves. Until a friend not long after college graduation said, you don't have to live your life like that. And it was a friendship like that that encouraged me into professional counseling. And I would say to you, you don't have to live your life like that. We have to have somewhere to go with our emotions. Emotions are a good thing and they're real. It's partly the biggest difference between us and anything else that we see around us. Our questions, our doubts, and our concerns are both our illogical and our logical ones. We need somewhere to go with that, and I do strongly believe that professional counseling is incredibly meaningful, it's incredibly helpful in your pursuit of understanding yourself. I would point you to Dr. Siebert and Steve any day of the week, all the time. They are resources that are available to you for free and in this community. And there are fantastic resources and tools at your fingertips and in your proximity every single day. At no other time in your life will you be surrounded by such access to incredibly different perspectives and opportunities to learn for free, not really, thanks to tuition, but that literally though, that this is such a unique experience. Even in COVID, it's still present and here. And at no other time in your life will you be around people your age and in the same stage of life, pursuing similar things that you can build a friendship with. Many of the authentic friendships I have still today came from my time in college. And yes, I know it looks different, but I would invite you to say that, you know what, I'm going to choose differently because my life and my health is worth the cost of me actually pursuing that friend. So professional counseling that I didn't pursue until after college, I would encourage you to do it now. So that professional counseling and healthy, authentic friendships and relationships helped heal my broken perspective on myself and the world around me. But I want to say, and that leads to my second question, that at the end of the day, my professional counseling and the healing in the context of healthy relationships only got me so far. It was the pursuit of truth in my life and a relationship with Jesus that absolutely saved my life and brought peace to my troubled heart and my troubled mind. You guys know I'm the area director of Crew, so this is what I talk about when I sit across the table with the girls that I get the privilege to talk to. I searched for hope in a lot of things around me, and ultimately, they all fell short at some point. When things like my own competency in class, or my career path, or medicine, or a government official, or a relationship with a specific person failed me or didn't meet my expectations, then where did my hope come from? So again, what I would say to you that could help you thrive and not fail is to actually ask yourself the question, what are you putting your hope in today? Is it in yourself and in your abilities? That's a lot of pressure to put on yourself. Is it in someone else, a friend, a girlfriend, a boyfriend, a mentor, a parent? Is it that job or that internship? Is it the good grades? Is it the vaccine? Is it your finances? Does it all hinge on your ability to control the outcome? But really what you are putting your hope in today, I want you to think about that and ask yourself, how's it working out for you? Because when I think about where my worth comes from and where my purpose in life comes from and where my freedom comes from and where love comes from, a knowing of who God is in relationship with Him is what I lean into and helps me thrive day in and day out. And Dr. Cook mentioned the spiritual side of wellness. I would love to invite you to consider, what does your spiritual health look like? And ask yourself that question because it's deeply, deeply connected to your mental and emotional health. Deeply connected. And I believe a pursuit of a relationship with Jesus is the ultimate answer to how you actually thrive. That's how I would answer that question.
Dr. Siebert.
You know, it's a hard question to kind of answer. I think the first thing I would say is that it's important to recognize that everything that we're talking about is ultimately temporary. You know, I think if the difference between seeing it that way and seeing it in a different way is the difference between this is my new normal or this is a thing that has to be endured. And I think that when your framework is such that you view it as a thing that has to be endured, you understand that there is a finish line, albeit an indistinct one sometimes, that I think can make the whole thing a little bit more easy to cope with. One of the hardest things about COVID when it first started was it felt very open-ended. You know, we didn't know, you know, everything kept getting deferred, right? We started talking about, well, we're just doing this 2 weeks to stop the spread, right? And then it's like, well, let's just finish off the semester. And then it's like, yeah, no fans are coming to NFL games. You know, and it's like, as we go chronologically through the calendar, we just see things getting kind of robbed or changed or amended without any, always in the direction of less and always pretty severely curtailed. And I think that, you know, it gets very tempting to say like, well, this is it now, this is the new normal, this sucks, right? And so I think it's important to keep in mind, like, you know, there is a massive hunger in this country and elsewhere to return to something that resembles normal. And so I think we're going to get there. It's just a question of precisely when, and is it swift or is it kind of drawn out? But we will. There's just too much pressure out there. There's too much motivation for us to have those contacts roughly the way that they used to be. And so this does have a finish line on it, and that's an important thing to keep in mind. I think it's important to accept that this is really unique. You know, every generation, I think, encounters one thing, at least one, maybe more, hopefully not too many, where it is historically noteworthy the instant it happens, right? For me, that was 9/11. I remember precisely where I was. I was living in Germany at the time, and I didn't find out it was the middle of the night, and I find out from some people on the street that were Americans that I had met 5 days earlier, and they looked white as a ghost, and then they explained to me what this thing was, and I went back to my apartment, and I watched international CNN, and proceeded to freak out for like 3 days. Actually, like 3 months, right? And so that was like, you knew it. You're like, this is a chapter in a history book. Like, damn. And I think that COVID's one of those. You know, the instant it happens, as soon as the ball really got rolling, we're like, this is not your ordinary news story. And so what we are dealing with is something unique and generationally unique. And I think it's important to kind of keep that in mind. This isn't an everyday kind of thing. This is a historically noteworthy one. I think it's really important to look after your own self-care. And I think that that involves not neglecting your overall health. Right? I think of care and self-care, and we use that term a lot in psychology, but like, I think of self-care as like really closely tied to sustainability and personal sustainability. But if you can do something superhuman for 3 weeks and then you burn out totally, that's actually not that valuable to us. The 3 weeks is remarkable. The 3 weeks is frankly really impressive, right? It's just superhuman levels of effort. Oh my God, downright impressive. But we measure success in a place like this in 16-week chunks. So whole semesters. You know, and so we have to arrive at week 16, and yes, you're going to be fatigued. And yes, you're going to be ready for it to be over. You know, but we want you to get to week 16 and have just enough in the tank that if we hand you one more worksheet, you aren't going to want to stab us. Right? And so I think approaching it with like, how do I work exhaustively? And you're never going to get away from a place like this without real significant amounts of time put into studying and applying yourself to classes. It's just part of it. But like, how do we get to a place where we you know, leave just enough in the tank that we can like put the books away and go to sleep, and sleep soundly, you know, or put the books away and go spend some time with your friends to the degree that that's feasible now, you know. And so the healthiest students are just I've spent years trying to figure out what that secret sauce is so that I could just distill it and serve it up to everybody. What do the most successful students have in common? And I've never found it, so prepare to be disappointed. But one of the things that they do have, I'm onto a tendril here. The healthiest and most successful students at this campus have nothing in common with each other with respect to age, race and ethnicity, background. They come from all different backgrounds. They come from schools that are graduating classes of like 4,000 people and graduating classes of 4 people. The one thing that they have in common, though, is that they are just remarkably good at balancing competing priorities. Right? They know what they apply time to their social life, guilt-free. They apply time to school without being distracted. They say, I've earned the right to play Minecraft for a while, right? And like they do, you know, and they find ways to fit the critical things into their life, including the things that are strictly personal and have nothing to do with school. You know, your social lives, the social relationships need to be maintained. You can't just like ghost a boyfriend or girlfriend for 3 weeks and not expect them to be like, what the hell? Right? They're going to have a thought about that. And so, you know, I think, you know, self-care involves like thinking about your overall health, not just like mental health, because these things are all tied together. If you don't sleep and you're totally exhausted, I promise you your mental health will be affected. The fastest way for us to make any problem worse, depression's bad, but depression plus exhaustion Anxiety's bad. Anxiety plus exhaustion is worse. So if we add exhaustion to any problem, we can make any problem worse. And so, one of the things we need to think about is like, how do we, even if something's present for us and we're kind of grappling with it, how do we not make it worse while we kind of like keep kind of making forward progress? And then one thing I'd say is that, all of a sudden in my clinical life, I find myself making genuine clinical recommendations that never would have made it onto the prime time previously. Like I have never in my career until 2020 ever recommended that somebody play video games as a genuine, formally structured clinical intervention. But now, people will say, this is all I got. It's this or isolation, right? Like I have this health condition, I really shouldn't go out. I can't do this, I can't do that. They make a compelling reason for why their options are limited, and they say, but, some buddies of mine from high school would tend to get together and we play Grand Theft Auto and we run over some imaginary civilians together and we have a good time. And it's like, okay, normally I'm not like all in on video games, but like if that props up your social connectedness, and it is calming, and it is a genuine departure that allows you to kind of hit reset and clear your mind and shake it out a little bit. Well, guess what? Video games just became essential, right? And so I've kind of getting comfortable with like the unorthodox nature of things that we need to kind of recommend that ordinarily would have been kind of in my mind. And then the last thing I would say is, a lot of this conversation has reminded me of a book that I actually read for the first time last year. It's a real famous book by Viktor Frankl called Man's Search for Meaning. So Man's Search for Meaning concerns Viktor Frankl's experience in a concentration camp. And he was a psychologist. He just got rounded up and was in this concentration camp. But what he describes is the experience inside. Obviously it's horrifying. But he described it as, he described people who were utterly despondent, of course. He describes people who were big thieves. He describes people who were pretty unethical, right? Sell out their buddy to get something for themselves, right? One more scoop of soup or whatever, And he also described acts of unspeakable kindness. Giving somebody literally your last morsel of food. And the case that he ultimately made is like how people, he's like, this was terrible. Like he's not defending concentration camp. But he says like how people made sense of the experience was deeply relevant in what their ultimate experience was. Some people didn't make it out, obviously. Some people didn't make it out for reasons related to maybe suicide and things. But some people made it out and they weren't better off for it, but they made the best of a terrible situation. And they found meaning in this circumstance. And they found healthy choices they could make in connection with others that made their experience less bad than it could be. And that to me, it kind of, there's a thread there that I think ties all shared traumatic experiences together. And that I found.
Thank you. I would echo that book as well, just in terms of we appreciate hearing other people's experiences, and it's, I think, a fair consensus that no one would want to be in that situation. So to hear something that could be resilient even in that environment, I would echo that book as well. But even to answer this question myself of what could be helpful and help students thrive, two things came to mind, and I think, once again, I'm just echoing what our panelists are saying, but just from my own perspective, I'd recommend prioritizing routine over spontaneity. And I mean routine like down to the hour, if not down to the minute. To think about these balanced activities that need to happen, or trying to weave in a walk, or trying to break up screen time, I would echo that 100%. That even in 15-minute increments, things can be different, particularly if there's some intentionality behind it. And when energy level is so compromised, sometimes you have to measure life in 15-minute increments. So as long as you got one thing done, that can count. If you got 4 things done today, that can count. But just this intention to prioritize things that will work. And second, certainly building with what Courtney talked about, is speaking to anyone else. Isolation is worse in silence. Isolation is worse when you think that no one else might be experiencing what I'm experiencing. But even with these 5 different perspectives up here, we're all seeing the same things. And so people's lived experiences right now on this campus at this year, probably there is lots of identification to make. So I would really strongly encourage that intentionality. And perhaps people don't have comfort zones anymore because they've shrunk so much. So any effort you make to do anything different is going to be beneficial. It's not wasted effort. So I would just put those 2 issues out there. But certainly trying to finish it and trying to see if there's other thoughts that our panelists have of trying to think of what are 1 or 2 recommendations that you would make, just thinking ahead and trying to give the best possible nuggets to the students here, students watching, would be just a way to kind of finish some of our time. And if there are questions here, please feel free to, when we get all the way around through 5 of us, then keep that in mind. We certainly can answer those too. But so just what are some of these final thoughts from each of you for everyone here?
Dana?
I said it before, and I'll say it again, for any student actually, not just those that are struggling in classes, but all students, like, I highly recommend going to the Tutoring Learning Center. Both, I think they have in-person ones, but they definitely have virtual ones. They have group tutoring, individual tutoring, writing lab, mentoring sessions. They have just about everything you can think of, and if they don't have it and you reach out, they will try and find you help for it. So I know they don't offer help for music classes, but if you reach out to them and they have a tutor that has already taken that class or is a music major and is willing to help you, they will get you connected. And I think that is so crucial to remember, that there is help that has already been curated, and you are already paying for it. It is already there, set in place. All you have to do is either walk in person in the basement of the library, or sign up for a Zoom time, or just drop in, and it's there for you. I also highly recommend for any student that lives in a residence hall to reach out to your RA or your hall director if you're having an issue. That's literally what they're there for, is to help you. They may not have, PhDs for counseling, but they're able to get you to the right resources and to the right people. They're able to listen to you if you just had a very stressful day and you can't handle it. They're able to, help you. They're able to bring you to different events if you don't want to go alone. And they put on events in every hall. Almost every week there are events in every hall for people to go to, whether they're online or in person. I highly recommend. And if you feel comfortable, go to in-person events. They happen every week on campus. If you ever need a schedule of events, every event that happens on campus is posted on Spin. And every student, they're all free for students to go to. You just need your ID. And it's really a great way for students to be able to relax, de-stress, potentially meet new people. That is not a requirement though. And just really recognize that you don't have to be alone if you're not seeking to be alone. If you have the energy to go out, I highly recommend it, because I know it makes a difference in students' day-to-day lives if they're able to do that. And then the last thing that I have is something a little different. It's something that my capstone teacher has actually brought into my life. Dr. Valerie Barsky, every Monday and Wednesday when we have our capstone, she does embodied learning warm-ups, which sounds a little interesting at first, and it is a little weird when you start. I'm not gonna lie, especially since I do it in the DUC, since I have an in-person class right before. It'll be different things like shaking out your arms, shaking out your legs, giving yourself a massage, doing facial tapping, breathing. She does laughter yoga, different things to kind of break up the monotony of your day. We're all on Zoom all day, so you just sit there kind of over in a hunched over position like this. Really bad for your back and for your brain. And I highly recommend if you can do something silly or something different, bring that into your life. Break the monotony of COVID and of your day-to-day schedule. Yeah.
Very good. Thank you.
I love that, Dana. Thanks. Thanks for sharing that. So you all are pointers, and I'm a pointer, so I came up with 4 quick pointers. First one, I want you to point inward. Examine the condition of your mind and your heart. Truly seek help if you need it. Steve, Dana, Jason, Courtney, they've shared some amazing resources that we have available to us, both here on campus and off campus too, so take advantage of that. Point outward. Surround yourself with other positive, grounded people. Those people will encourage you to make great decisions, and they may even give you a chance to build into their lives. It'll change your perspective. Third point is point upward. Gain perspective. This too shall pass. For me, it means paying more attention to the dimensions of wellness, particularly for me, the spiritual one. My last pointer is to point forward, to stay positive. You have endured unbelievable things for a year. Better days lie ahead. So as the only professor on this panel, I can't let you go without giving you some homework. Before you let your head hit the pillow tonight, I want each and every one of you, those of you in the room with us right now, those of you watching this via video later on your screen, get your phones out and send 2 texts. First of all, I want you to send a text to one person that you know that could really use some encouragement. Say something nice to them. Encourage them in a meaningful way. It can change your life. And then I want you to think about who you can send another text to. Someone you feel may have the resources available that might serve as an encouragement to you in some aspect of your life. Someone you can reach out to and trust. Send a text to them. Let them know that you need them in your life. I've already identified the 2 people I'm going to reach out to tonight, and I hope you do the same thing before you go to bed tonight.
Classic professor doing homework. I love it. That's good to hear. And then you're like, I haven't really thought about what my habits are like and how that's impacting my life and this area of my life and this area of my life, and even down to like what you're scrolling, if you're exercising, what you're eating, all of that has impact on your day-to-day life, and then in turn can increase or decrease your capacity when you read something in the news or you get a message from a parent telling you something about something that sends you possibly into a spiral. I think it's asking yourself questions of like, what's my inputs? Like, what am I watching on TV? What am I seeing on TikTok? Who am I following on Instagram? And is that actually helping and informing me, or is it triggering me in different ways? Like, actually intentionally ask yourself those questions that I think, at least when I think back to college, but even the students that I sit across the table from, you're used to maybe your parents or your mentor or grandparents asking you questions like that up until you come to college, but welcome to adulthood. You're the one that gets to decide now. And I don't think, we don't think about that. I think that can really shift for college students. They don't realize that maybe that was something that you always had and now you don't, and now you're here. So you get to be the one to ask those questions. So intentionality is the key word that I would say. And then we weren't created to do life alone, is the other thing I would say. I know it's hard in circumstances, and I know I mentioned before that the social muscles might be weak. Fight it with every bit you got, and because we need to insert ourselves into relationships, and also for those who maybe have a little bit more muscle, I love your homework, Dr. Cook. Like, if you have a little bit more strength, like, be the one that would reach out to, maybe you would be the last little boost that could get them to come to something, to go to that event with your RA, to go to that comedian on campus, even if you all have to wear masks or whatever it is. It's just this reality of like, it won't always, I agree with you, Dr. Siebert, it won't always be like this, but when we come out of this thing, what do we want to be true of us? I think is key. And I know I already mentioned this, but really do ask yourself intentionally what you think about life after death. What do you think about God? Where are you drawing your hope from today? I'd really invite you to consider being a part of, I will say that active orgs on campus, the faith-based orgs have been really active on campus. Crew certainly has been very active on campus. And I would love to invite you to even come and ask questions. You don't need to be a Christian already to come. And pursuing a faith-based community to help you in that process would be huge. So those would be the things that I would say. Intentionality, pursuing friendships with everything you got, and pursuing faith-based communities and asking questions maybe you haven't asked before.
I think I would answer that question with, just be patient with yourself. You know, it's easy in this place to get frantic. You know, the stakes are high, it's expensive, there's evaluations by experts, sometimes deeply critical evaluations. And so it's very easy to get impatient with yourself. And I would say to be very, very cautious. When you're talking about yourself, be very cautious with the word should. Right? You know, I should do this, I should do that, I should be this. Says who?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think that we need to be a little bit cautious with that. And it's really hard. I guess I'd put it this way. You know, there is a real difference between excellence and perfection. Excellence is obtainable, but excellence doesn't involve 100.0% on every single thing handed to you. You know, and if you get a 96 on something, or a 91 on something, I guess technically you could do a little bit better, but there isn't anyone around, including your instructors, who are going to say you don't know what you're talking about. Right? And so I think we need to give ourselves just a little bit of space. And under the current circumstances, it behooves us, I think, to give ourselves just a little bit more than your average amount of space. And keep an eye toward what is excellent under the circumstances, while abandoning perfection altogether, because it's impossible and it's pointless to chase. So those are some things that I think that we, you know, just being patient with yourself, forgiving of yourself, understanding that this is a weird anomaly and that all the other rules don't apply. We can still hold ourselves to high standards, but I think, you know, we have to play this game on the field that we've been given, not the field that we wish we had. And so part of that involves balancing, you know, your own aspirations with a tolerance of this current reality, which is very real and great as well.
Very good recommendations. And to add on, just my thoughts, typically I will say that there are 3 red flags that concern me when I hear them in people's lives. Isolation, withdrawal, and silence. So basically I can be concerned about everybody right now in 2021. Everyone is now saying they need counseling, right? That's usually my, hey, if this happens, go to counseling. So we're all checking off that list. So in an effort to push back on what feels like that normal we're trying to resist and see it differently, just some recommendations from me is that even with an excellent point, Dr. Siebert, about family, that sometimes your family you left from is not someplace you want to go back to, you're not ready yet. Well, make another family. Thinking about whether it's roommates or it's a student org you're a part of, or you think about athletes and their teammates and things like that. So go ahead and make a new family if you need to, because that identification, that close proximity, knowing someone and letting them know you will carry you through this time. That kind of transparency and willingness to let somebody in. Second, in regards to withdrawal, we've all been forced to withdraw from things we like. So what can we do? And I think it's controlling the things you can do. You can control the things you do with your body. So focusing on sleep, excellent point. We can make things worse if we're underslept. So trying to get that 7 to 9 hours every night as much as possible, and keeping track of it. Thankfully, everyone's got those smart watches now. It's going to keep track of how well you slept and whatever. Little contest with yourself to see how good you can get it to happen. Because without that sleep, your body, your brain, your heart, whatever, is not resetting. And the world will seem wicked the next morning just as much. So eating right. We did brainstorm early on, like, could we get some custodians here and just tell us, what does the garbage look like on campus now? What are they taking out? What are the diets turning to? Is it all just bags of J's, like potato chips? Or is there something else? But just knowing how much that what we put in our body in terms of food can make all the difference between success and failure. So focusing on what you're putting in your body as well, and then finding any sort of energy-giving activity, whatever it might be. Why do they have dogs that go into nursing homes? Right? Because dogs and certain little kids having fun, it makes us laugh. Why are some of the most popular videos pet videos and kids doing incredible things? It naturally puts a smile on our face, and there's nothing to be said for at least that little escape and that little spontaneous laughter that will go a long way. So you have to find things that will give you energy. But simply, how do we, perhaps I was trying to give some thoughts to how do you summarize all of this? How do you bring it down? And 3 words came to mind, and just trying to define those a bit. So this first part about admit, act, and accept. So encouragement is to admit, like say, this is not working for me. Don't sit in silence. We've heard examples from everybody of just the discouragement that come in, the despair that could come in, something else. So just admitting this isn't okay. To speak up about it. But that act has to be, I need to ask for help. It's one thing to go, boy, I am totally in over my head, or I don't know what I'm going to do. But with all these ideas and unique perspectives on the stage tonight, it's ask for help. There are text lines, right? There are 800 numbers people can call. There are still a few 24-hour places people can go. A lot of people still have their phones right next to their bed all night long. Will affects their sleep, but someone will pick up. And that's an important thing to recognize no matter what day of the week it is or what time of day. Ask for help. And then finally, this is word of accept, to talk it through. That this will pass, or this is temporary, this isn't a new normal. To be able to talk it through and accept it and say, what can I do about it? That is where resiliency is born. To start to say, well, here's what I can control, and I will continually press that edge and try and do better. So even in a pandemic, a life or generational defining moment, there are ways that people can endure it better. So just 3 words I would leave with you. Admit and speak up, act and ask for help, and accept, but talk it through, see what your plan can be to feel better. So with all 5 of us sharing all of our thoughts in a relatively good amount of time, so thank you for just short and really essential pieces of advice and observations. Are there any questions perhaps that come to mind from any of you here, or any other thoughts that any of you would want to share that perhaps have been stirred? Because we certainly have the time to do that if needed. Any thoughts or any other final comments to make?
Question.
Yes.
What for? I guess this is for you, Dr. Siebert, and you, Steve.
Sure.
What has been like the increase of people who have sought like professional mental health versus like pre-COVID versus now? Have you seen like a big increase, or just more help from people that were already in professional counseling?
That's a hard question. Because we've actually seen a decrease. But it's not for the reasons you think. So our demand is slightly lower. Now, we've always been one of the most heavily utilized student services on campus. We've always run a wait list pretty early in each semester. But and this is not, I'm not calling this a positive, but let's just say one side effect of the current situation is that we have a disproportionate number of people who are studying remotely, not anywhere near Stephen's Point. And so a lot of those people have taken up mental health care closer to where they happen to be. And that's a good thing. But it has taken a little bit of the pressure off our office. And so while we do have a wait list, I didn't check it today, but as of yesterday, it was 11 names. It takes us days to get through 11 names. That's not an alarming number. 80 is an alarming number. 100 is an alarming number. 11 is not. And so we are actually having the experience of getting people in somewhat more swiftly than we would normally have at this time of the year. Now, everyone coming to the table has a little bit more serious stuff on the table. So the individual people are feeling a little bit worse off, a little bit higher risk, more consequences, higher stakes, verge of failing out, that kind of thing, much more than that. But in terms of sheer volume, a touch less. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that was very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is there are 5 therapists at our agency that work, and there were stretches through the pandemic where none of us had an appointment. And that's probably a combination, not just college students, that's primarily where you're drawing, but we're working in a community that has a college, has all these 2 major high schools, a lot of other businesses that have gone down, so we were all busy. I'd say the uniqueness in some ways is the virtual counseling that has come out. So I'm glad to hear college students going home and getting help. That's fantastic, but it has forced us as an agency, and probably lots of other agencies, to figure out how to do that. And so because we have, it meant that we haven't had to experience a drop off. Because there's groups of people who say, I'm coming to see you face to face no matter what, and I'm going to be there, don't you dare shut down, don't you do anything different. And there's other people that said, oh my gosh, I can't go to counseling anymore. So when we can provide virtual, it changes the game, and suddenly all that anxiety if I have to leave my house, I have to go to a place that's high traffic or whatever else. So I think I would say, fortunately, the numbers are there to serve people who've come in. And the intensity, it's a new slew of issues. As I've hinted at, all the coping is gone, and all the stressors you wouldn't think would become a stressor is now present. And that has added a new layer to already complicated lives. As Courtney had said earlier, who had margin for COVID? Right? Who was ready to suddenly have everything turn upside down? And rarely is that the case, that people can just coast along and absorb something so significant, and certainly that embodies trauma through many different experiences people have had. Talking with families who, you hear about how COVID has affected people differently. Lingering symptoms and effects of it weeks later, besides the sense of taste and smell that haven't come back, the people with long-term difficulty breathing and catching it, just the fear they have of what goes on, and the technological impacts. As you said, everyone's living on technology, and who do we trust, and what's the new report's going to come out and give us the peace of mind that, this is going to work, or it's not. So that constant sense of drive for anxiety, I think, has just put things to a louder level. But fortunately, I'm glad to hear that counseling agencies are standing up underneath it and finding a way to work. And even ones that shut down, I know in different communities, still said we're going to go virtual. And wonderfully enough, the state of Wisconsin got behind that and allowed telemental health counseling to be covered by insurance now. That was huge. Even Badger Care, which a lot of people are on in the state, is now permanently covering telehealth to go forward. And I think I just read an article that Tony Evers is trying to pass the next budget, where he's going to make sure every insurance company, this is what he wants, I don't know if it'll pass, every insurance company operating in Wisconsin has to cover telehealth now if they cover it in the normal face-to-face scenario, which makes me very excited from a standpoint of we've now removed huge barriers for people who think I can't get to that agency, I can't get to that counselor, just like we've realized now that we had to do virtual check-ins with doctor appointments and everything else. So, and drive-thrus were a thing. Now we all have takeout. I don't have to go into Target anymore ever again. And I can just pull up and someone carries something out. There may be some of those things that we find that we'll have to remember this came out of a really terrible time. But we hopefully will see some good things that we can take from it. Next question.
Are you guys going to like other universities like for this panel, or just mainly the Stevens Point area?
Just here. I hope it's happening on other campuses,
Okay.
but just us here to do it. But fortunately, it's recorded, and so that will hopefully pass its way through perhaps other crew organizations or other like-minded individuals to share that and pass it on. Other thoughts from the panel or anything in the time we have left?
I just wanted to say thank you to you, Steve and Courtney, for setting this up. I think remarkably there aren't more things like this that are available to students. So I'm hoping lots of students look at this on YouTube, lots of students come to our professionals and seek help, and there's advantages to having something like this on our campus. So thanks for setting that up. That's pretty dang sweet.
You want to close this, Courtney? Any final comments?
No final comments, other than just thanks for coming, thanks for being here, and there is a reason why we recorded it, because there were multiple people that messaged in different facets, those I knew and those I didn't know who couldn't be here but wanted to hear what we heard. So I would even invite you to add, I'll give homework, Dr. Cook.
It's contagious.
When it gets posted tomorrow, I would invite you to share it with somebody that you think could benefit from it. Even if there's something that you heard specifically, maybe Steve say or Dr. Siebert say or Dana say that could be really helpful that you could point them to. I just think a lot of people do need access to the information, or just need to hear somebody validate the pain and the normalcy of it, which is the heart behind us wanting to do something like this and to serve one another and serve the university, because we're all in this together. So just want to invite you to share it with somebody as well. So, but thanks for coming, thanks for being here, thanks for supporting it. Thank you, Dr. Siebert and Dana and Dr. Cook and Steve, very much